grave whisper.
They say Savannah is haunted, but no one tells you what happens when the dead decide you belong to them.
People like to call Savannah, Georgia, beautiful. They talk about the oak trees draped in Spanish moss, the slow river breeze, the old brick streets that seem frozen in time. They say it's romantic, historic, peaceful. But no one ever tells you what the city does after dark. I didn't come to Savannah looking for ghosts. I came because my father died there. The call came late at night, one of those calls that already feels wrong before you even answer. The voice on the other end told me he'd been found near Bonaventure Cemetery, collapsed beside a family plot that didn't belong to us. No signs of violence, no explanation, just gone. My father had never believed in the supernatural. He was a practical man, former military, the kind who laughed at ghost tours and rolled his eyes at haunted house stories. So when I arrived in Savannah and heard people whispering things like, "That cemetery doesn't give people back," I told myself it was just local folklore. That was my first mistake. I arrived in the late afternoon when the sun still painted everything gold. Bonaventure looked peaceful from the outside. Massive stone angels, iron gates, weathered statues watching silently over the dead. The air smelled like damp earth and salt from the nearby river. Birds perched on the mausoleums as if nothing here had ever gone wrong. But the moment I stepped through the gates, something changed. The sound of the city faded, like someone had slowly turned down the volume of the world. No traffic, no distant voices, just my footsteps and the strange feeling that they weren't the only ones echoing. I told myself it was grief. The police report was thin. My father had been seen walking alone into the cemetery just before sunset. No camera footage showed him leaving. His watch had stopped at exactly 6:17 p.m. The coroner said his heart had simply failed, but his face told a different story. They let me see him before the body was sent home. His eyes were wide open, his jaw clenched so tight it looked painful, and carved faintly on the skin of his forearm, so lightly they almost missed it, were the words, "It knows you now." The officers said it was probably a scratch from a branch or an animal. I knew my father's handwriting. That night, I checked into a small hotel not far from the cemetery. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard leaves crunching, footsteps circling my bed, soft breathing that wasn't mine. At exactly 6:17 a.m., I woke up to the sound of knocking. 3 slow taps. I opened the door to an empty hallway, but lying on the floor was something that made my blood turn cold. My father's watch, the same one that had stopped when he died. I should have left Savannah that morning, packed my bags, gone home. That's what normal people would have done. But instead, I did the exact thing the city wanted. I went back to Bonaventure, because something in me, something deep and ancient, needed to know what followed my father out of that cemetery, and why it had followed me. As I passed through the gates again, the wind picked up. Spanish moss swayed like hanging bodies, and somewhere among the graves I heard a voice whisper my name. Not spoken, recognized. And that's when I realized the truth about Savannah. Some cities are haunted, but this one hunts.
I didn't tell anyone about the watch. Not the hotel clerk, not the police, not even my sister back home who kept texting me, asking if I was okay. Because how do you explain something like that? My father's watch had stopped at 6:17 p.m. the moment he died inside Bonaventure Cemetery. The coroner confirmed it. The battery hadn't been removed. No damage, just frozen in time. But the one left outside my hotel room, it was ticking. I held it in my palm that morning, standing in the dim hallway light. The second hand moved in smooth, steady circles, like nothing had ever happened. And the time? 6:17. Not a minute earlier, not a minute later. Exactly 6:17. The clock on my phone read 6:18 a.m. I dropped the watch like it had burned me. There are moments when your brain tries to protect you, when it rushes to build logic around something impossible. Maybe it wasn't Dad's watch. Maybe the police gave me the wrong one. Maybe I was exhausted, grieving. But when I picked it back up and turned it over, I saw the engraving on the back. To Michael, keep moving forward, Dad. I hadn't been called Michael since I was 10 years old. I drove back to Bonaventure before I could talk myself out of it. Morning light doesn't make that place less unsettling. If anything, it makes it worse. The shadows shrink, but they don't disappear. They just pull tighter around the graves, like something holding its breath. The iron gates groaned when I pushed them open. The air felt heavier than yesterday, thick like it was about to storm, even though the sky was clear above Savannah, Georgia. I walked straight to the plot where my father had been found. The grass was still disturbed, the earth darker where he'd collapsed, but something else was different. The headstone beside the spot where he died. Yesterday, I could have sworn it was blank, weathered smooth by time. Today, there was writing, not carved deep and old, fresh. The name on the stone read, Michael Harrison, born 1991, died, dash. The dash wasn't filled in. My chest tightened. My first instinct was to laugh, to convince myself it was some sick coincidence. Harrison wasn't an uncommon name, but the birth year was right, and beneath it, faint and uneven like it had been scratched with trembling hands, were the words 6:17. The watch in my pocket began ticking louder. I'm not saying that metaphorically. It got louder. Tick, 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 each second cutting into the silence like a blade. I stepped back from the grave, scanning the rows of monuments around me. Statues of angels stared down with blank stone eyes. The Spanish moss shifted, though there was no wind. Then I heard it. Footsteps, slow, dragging, behind me. I turned fast, too fast, and nearly slipped on the damp ground. There was no one there, but the footsteps didn't stop. They circled me, gravel crunching, leaves pressing under invisible weight, close enough that I could measure the distance, 3 feet to my left, then behind me, then to my right. I could feel it learning the shape of me. "You're not real," I whispered. The ticking stopped, complete silence, and then breathing right against my ear. Not cold, not warm, just present. I spun around again, heart slamming into my ribs,
And that's when I saw something that made the blood drain from my face. Across the cemetery path, about 20 yards away, stood a man near one of the larger mausoleums. He was wearing my father's jacket, same brown leather, same torn cuff on the right sleeve. But his posture wasn't right. His shoulders hung too loose, like his bones didn't sit properly under the skin. His head tilted slowly to one side, studying me. I tried to call out. No sound came. The man took one step forward, and with that step, the sun dimmed. Clouds rolled in unnaturally fast, swallowing the light over Bonaventure. The temperature dropped so sharply, I saw my breath fog in front of me. He took another step, and I realized something worse than fear. He wasn't walking toward me. He was walking toward the headstone with my name on it. As he reached it, he extended one shaking hand and traced the empty dash beneath "died." The watch in my pocket started ticking again, but now it wasn't counting seconds, it was counting down. 6:16, 6:15, 6:14. I didn't wait to see what happened at 0. I ran. Through rows of graves, past marble angels and broken crosses. My lungs burned, my vision blurred. The footsteps followed, never faster, never slower, matching me, patient. When I burst through the cemetery gates and into the street, the world snapped back to normal. Cars passed, a couple walked their dog, sunlight returned like nothing had ever changed. I turned back. The gates were closed, locked, and through the iron bars, I saw the headstone one last time. The dash beneath "died" was no longer empty. It read, "Today."
I didn't go back to the hotel. I couldn't. Because if that headstone had my death date carved into it, then whatever was happening wasn't grief. It wasn't hallucination. It was a schedule, and it was already in motion. I drove without thinking, hands locked on the steering wheel, heart still pounding out of rhythm. The streets of Savannah, Georgia blurred past me. Historic homes, wrought iron balconies, tourists laughing on shaded sidewalks like the world wasn't quietly rearranging itself around me. Every clock I passed read 6:22 a.m., but my father's watch, lying face up on the passenger seat, read 6:12 and ticking down. 6:11, 6:10. It wasn't synced with real time. It was synced with something else. I pulled over near Forsyth Park, trying to breathe. The oak trees there are older than memory, their branches stretched wide like they're holding secrets in their shadows. I stepped out of the car and leaned against the door, fighting the wave of dizziness rising in my head. That's when I saw him again. Across the street, standing beneath a street lamp that wasn't even turned on. The man in my father's jacket. This time, I saw his face clearly. It was my father's face, but thinner, stretched, like someone had tried to redraw him from memory and gotten the details slightly wrong. His eyes were too dark, no reflection in them, no light. And when he smiled, it wasn't my father's smile. It was wider, too wide. A car passed between us for half a second. When it cleared, he was closer. Not walking, just closer. I got back into my car and slammed the door, locked it like that mattered. The watch hit 5 a.m. A full minute had disappeared. I didn't understand how the countdown worked, but I understood this. If it reached 0, something would happen.
and I had a feeling I wouldn't survive it. I did the only thing I could think of. I went to the police. The officer at the desk looked exhausted, mid-40s, coffee-stained paperwork, the kind of man who's seen everything and believes none of it. "I think something followed my father out of Bonaventure Cemetery," I told him. He didn't laugh. That scared me more than if he had. Instead, he leaned back slowly and asked, "You been back there since he died?" "Yes." He nodded once, like that confirmed something. Then he said something I wasn't ready to hear. "You're not the first." My throat tightened. "What do you mean?" He lowered his voice. "Every few years, someone dies out there. No cause, no trauma, just fear. That same expression, eyes wide, jaw locked." He paused, and almost every time, someone close to them comes back looking for answers. I swallowed. "And," he said, "and sometimes they don't leave." The room felt smaller. "Are you saying the cemetery?" He interrupted. "I'm saying that place doesn't like being disturbed. It's old ground, older than the city that grew around it, and some folks believe there's something buried deeper than the graves." The watch ticked. 5:42. "How do I stop it?" I asked. He stared at me for a long time before answering. "You don't." The fluorescent lights above us flickered, just once, but long enough for the room to dip into shadow. When they came back on, the officer's expression had changed. It wasn't concern anymore. It was recognition. "You brought it with you," he said quietly. A cold wave spread through my chest. "What?" His eyes shifted slowly to the watch in my hand. The ticking grew louder. 5:30, 5:29. The officer stood up stiffly, like his joints hurt. "You need to leave Savannah right now." I tried. He shook his head. "No, I mean leave it. Forget your father died here. Forget the cemetery. Go home and never say its name again." The lights flickered harder. The air in the room dropped 10 degrees, and behind the officer, reflected faintly in the glass window of his office, I saw the man in the brown jacket standing directly behind him, smiling. The officer didn't seem to notice, but I did, and when the reflection lifted one hand, the officer's head tilted at the same unnatural angle I'd seen before. The watch hit 5 a.m. The officer spoke again, but this time it wasn't his voice. It was my father's. "Michael," it said softly, "keep moving forward." The lights went out.
I don't remember moving. One moment I was standing in the dark police station, my father's voice echoing from a mouth that wasn't his, and the next I was outside, gasping like I'd just broken the surface of deep water. The night air slammed into my lungs. Behind me, the station lights were on, normal, calm. Through the glass, officers walked back and forth, laughing, talking, alive. No sign of the thing I'd just seen, but my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the watch. 4:52. Still counting down. I stumbled to my car and locked the doors, sitting there until my breathing slowed enough for my thoughts to catch up. Whatever was attached to my father wasn't pretending anymore, and it wasn't alone. I drove aimlessly for nearly an hour, afraid to stop, afraid to stay still long enough for it to find me again. Every red light felt like a trap. Every shadow between street lamps felt like a doorway.
That's when I noticed something wrong with the city itself. The streets were looping. I passed the same coffee shop 3 times, the same mural, the same gas station with a flickering neon sign. I checked my GPS. It said I was circling Savannah, Georgia, but the map kept recalculating, the route folding back on itself like a maze that didn't want to be solved. Then the watch skipped. 4:31, 4:20. It wasn't ticking evenly anymore. It was adjusting. I slammed the brakes and pulled over when I saw a hand-painted sign nailed to a fence near an old colonial house. No tours after dark. Do not enter the cemetery. Someone had scrawled underneath in black marker, "It follows blood." My chest tightened. Blood. Family. I got out of the car and walked toward the house. Lights glowed warmly inside, the only place that didn't feel hostile within blocks. I knocked before I could talk myself out of it. The door opened just a crack. A woman's eyes appeared in the gap, sharp, alert, old. "You shouldn't be out. I think something's trying to kill me." She studied my face. Then her gaze dropped to my hands, to the watch. Her expression changed instantly. The door opened wider. "Come in, and don't bring that thing any closer to me." Inside, the house smelled of incense and old books. Candles burned along the walls despite the electricity being on. Symbols I didn't recognize were carved into the doorframe. She introduced herself as Eleanor. She'd lived in Savannah her entire life, and "I've buried more people than I care to remember," she said, sitting across from me at a small wooden table. "Some of them twice." I told her everything. About my father, the cemetery, the man in the jacket, the watch, the countdown. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she nodded slowly. "You disturbed a watcher." "A what?" "A thing that keeps the dead where they belong. Most cities have them. Savannah's just older, hungrier." My stomach churned. "Why my father?" "Because he noticed it, and because you came back." I leaned forward. "How do I stop it?" She shook her head. "You don't stop a watcher. You obey its rules." "And what are the rules?" She raised one finger. "Rule 1. Once it marks you, it mirrors you. Faces you love, voices you trust." I thought of my father's smile. She raised a second finger. "Rule 2. Time does not belong to you anymore. That watch isn't counting down to your death." "What is it counting down to?" I asked. She hesitated. "Transfer." My mouth went dry. "You mean—" "It wants balance," she said. "Someone must remain. Someone must leave. Your father stayed. You were meant to go." The watch jumped again. 3:58, 3:45. Panic surged through me. "Then why is it chasing me?" Eleanor's eyes softened. "Because you're fighting it." She stood and walked to a shelf, pulling down an old leather-bound journal. She opened it to a page filled with names, some crossed out, some not. All these people went back to Bonaventure Cemetery after losing someone. Only one in each pair ever leaves. I stared at the list. My father's name was already there, fresh ink, still wet. And the others? She closed the book. They become part of the place, the voices people hear, the shapes between the graves. The candles flickered violently. From somewhere outside, I heard footsteps on gravel, slow, familiar. Eleanor's face hardened. "It's close. You don't have much time." The watch read 3 o'clock. She looked straight at me.
You have one chance to choose who stays. A knock echoed through the front door. 3 slow taps, and my father's voice whispered from the other side. "Michael, it's time."
I didn't answer the door. I couldn't, because the knock wasn't asking to come in. It was announcing arrival. Eleanor reached for my wrist and pulled me away from the entryway, her grip stronger than it looked. The candles along the walls bent inward, flames stretching like they were being drawn towards something hungry outside. "Listen to me," she whispered. "If it speaks to you directly, it gains ground." The voice came again, closer now, not raised, not angry, patient. "Michael, you don't belong here." My father had said that exact sentence once, years ago, when I told him I was quitting my job and moving across the country. Same tone, same pause before my name. My knees felt weak. The watch jumped. 2:41, 2:40, 2:38. It was accelerating. Eleanor pressed a small iron symbol into my palm. It burned cold, like touching ice too long. "This won't stop it," she said, "but it'll keep it from lying." The door handle turned slowly, didn't open, just tested. I could see the shadow through the frosted glass now, tall, uneven, its head tilted slightly to the side, like it was listening through the wood. "Your father agreed," the voice said softly. "He understood the rules." Eleanor flinched. "That's true," she murmured, "which means it's already preparing the exchange." My stomach twisted. "What exchange?" She met my eyes. "Yours." The handle stopped turning. Silence filled the house, thick enough to choke on. Then the voice changed. It stopped pretending to be my father. The tone dropped lower, deeper, older. "Return to Bonaventure Cemetery before the watch reaches 0, it said. "Walk willingly, alone." "And if I don't?" I asked, my voice barely holding together. The shadow on the glass stretched unnaturally long. "Then Savannah keeps more than one." Eleanor cursed under her breath. "That's not part of the balance," she snapped. The shadow shifted, almost amused. "Balance adapts." The candles blew out all at once. Darkness swallowed the room. I felt Eleanor shove me toward the back door. "Go," she hissed. "It can't cross this threshold unless invited, but that won't last." I ran, out into the humid Savannah night, Spanish moss brushing my face like cold fingers. The streets felt wrong, too empty, too still. No cars, no voices, even the insects had gone quiet. The watch read 2:05, ticking faster with every step. I didn't know where I was going, only where it wanted me to be. As I ran, memories that weren't mine began bleeding into my thoughts. Images of moonlit graves, hands pressed into damp earth, voices whispering from beneath stone. I realized then that the Watcher didn't just guard the dead, it collected them, their stories, their faces, their families. I reached the cemetery gates without remembering the walk there. They were open, wide, inviting. The iron creaked softly as I stepped through, like the place was exhaling in relief. Inside, the air felt heavier than anywhere else in Savannah, Georgia. The oak trees loomed overhead, branches interlocking to block out the moon. The paths shifted subtly as I walked, bending toward the center, toward the river, toward the oldest graves. The watch hit 1:30. I stopped near my headstone. It was waiting for me. The stone was fully carved now, name, birth date, and beneath it, died 6:17 p.m. tomorrow. My father stood on the other side of the path, not flickering, not distorted,
solid. He looked tired. "Dad?" I whispered. He nodded slowly. "It doesn't let us rest, only repeat." Tears burned my eyes. "Why didn't you fight it?" "I did, until I realized someone else didn't have to." The truth hit me like a physical blow. "You offered yourself so I could leave." He looked away. "It told me you'd be safe, that the cycle would end with me." The ground beneath us trembled. From between the graves, the Watcher rose, not fully visible, just pieces at a time, a face that shifted every few seconds, a torso that looked made of shadow and bone, countless hands reaching inward toward a center that didn't exist. You were never meant to return, but blood called blood. The watch hit 0:45. I turned to my father. "There has to be another way." He stepped closer. "There is, but it costs more." The Watcher leaned in, interested. "You can stay," my father whispered. "Take my place completely. Bind yourself to it. Or," he swallowed, "you can make it take both of us." The watch hit 0:10, 0:09, 0:08. The Watcher stretched toward us, shadows curling like smoke. "Choose," it said. I looked at my father, then at my name carved in stone, then at the watch in my hand, and I made a decision that Savannah would never forget. I closed my hand around the watch. The ticking had become frantic, no longer steady, no longer patient. It sounded like a heart trying to outrun its own ending. The Watcher waited. It didn't rush me. It never had. That was the worst part. "I choose neither," I said. The thing tilted its many shifting faces toward me. Interest rippled through it like wind across dark water. "Balance requires payment. Refusal increases cost." My father stepped forward, placing himself between me and the shadow. For the first time since I'd seen him die, he looked afraid. "Michael," he said quietly, "don't do this." "I'm already doing it," I answered. I lifted the watch and slammed it against the edge of my headstone. Glass shattered. The ticking stopped. The silence that followed was wrong, too complete, like the world itself had paused to see what would happen next. The Watcher recoiled, not in pain, in surprise. "Time," it said slowly, "is not yours to break." Maybe not, but memory is. I grabbed the broken watch and pressed the jagged edge into my palm. Blood ran down my fingers, warm and real. The ground beneath the cemetery shuddered violently. The oak trees groaned overhead, branches twisting as if trying to pull themselves free from the earth. From every direction came whispers, hundreds of them, voices layered on top of each other, all saying the same thing: "Leave, leave, leave." The Watcher surged forward, its shape unraveling, faces flickering rapidly, men, women, children, old and young, each one frozen in the same expression of terror I'd seen on my father. "You cannot deny the count," it roared. "I'm not denying it. I'm changing what you count." I stepped backwards, off the path, into the grass, into the unmarked ground between graves, where the soil felt softer, wrong, the place where names were forgotten. "I give you what you want, a keeper." My father's eyes widened. "No," he said, "that's not how this ends." I met his gaze. "You kept it fed.
I said gently. "I'll keep it empty." I drove the broken watch deep into the soil. The effect was immediate. The whispers turned into screams. The watcher convulsed, its form collapsing inward like a burning building folding into itself. Shadows peeled away, sinking into the ground, dissolving into the spaces between roots and bones. Time snapped back into place. The moon surged out from behind the clouds. The air warmed. And then, everything stopped. The watcher froze mid-collapse, suspended like a statue made of smoke. "You cannot remain without a name," it said, voice weakening. "You will fade." "That's the idea," I replied. The cemetery grew still. I felt it then, the pull, not physical, something deeper, like gravity tugging at my memories, my thoughts, my sense of self. My father stepped closer. "You'll forget me," he said. "I already won't. That's the problem." He smiled sadly. "I'm proud of you." The ground opened beneath him, not violently, not painfully, just a gentle descent, like being lowered into deep water. As he faded, his face finally relaxed, at peace. The watcher dissolved completely, its last fragments sinking into the soil along with the watch. The cemetery exhaled. I don't remember leaving. I woke up the next morning on a bench near the river, sunlight warming my face, the sound of boats drifting along the water like nothing had ever been wrong. My hand was bandaged. The watch was gone, and when I checked my phone, the date had changed. I went to the cemetery one last time. My headstone was gone. So was my father's. In their place stood an old, unmarked oak tree, its roots thick, its branches wide, its shadow stretching protectively across the ground. No whispers, no footsteps, just wind. I left Savannah that afternoon. I never looked back. But sometimes, usually at exactly 6:17, I feel a pause in the world, just for a second, like something is counting and deciding not to. Because the truth is this: Savannah doesn't stop being hungry. It just learned what it costs to feed.
I should have known it wasn't over. Places like Savannah, Georgia don't lose something without noticing, and they don't forgive theft. For 3 weeks after I left, everything felt normal, too normal. I went back to work, answered emails, returned calls I'd ignored while I was in Georgia. My sister asked how I was holding up. I told her the funeral had given me closure. That was a lie. Because closure doesn't wake up at exactly 6:17 every evening with the taste of river water in its mouth. The first sign came quietly. Clocks, digital, analog, microwave displays, my car dashboard. At 6:17 p.m., every single one would freeze, just for a breath, just long enough for me to notice. Then they'd resume like nothing happened. I tried to ignore it. Grief does strange things to the mind. Trauma bends perception. That's what I told myself. Until the day I heard gravel crunch outside my apartment window. I live on the 3rd floor. There is no gravel outside my window. I stood still in the kitchen, heart hammering, listening. Crunch. Slow. Measured. Matching a pace I knew too well. I forced myself to look. The street below was empty, concrete, no trees close enough to cast movement against the glass. But in the reflection, Behind me, I saw an oak tree, Spanish moss hanging like gray fingers. I turned. Nothing. The kitchen was normal. When I looked back at the window, the tree was gone. The clock on the stove read 6:17. Then it flicked to 6:18. That night I dreamed of Bonaventure Cemetery. Not the way it looked when I was there. Older, darker. The graves were sinking, the river swollen and black. And standing at the center where my headstone had once been was the oak tree. Only it wasn't rooted in soil, it was rooted in shadow. And beneath it, I could hear voices, not screaming, calling, my name among them. I woke up with dirt under my fingernails, real dirt, dark and damp. That's when I understood. I hadn't destroyed the Watcher. I'd displaced it, bound it, and whatever I'd done in that cemetery hadn't severed the connection. It had rerouted it. The next evening, I tested something. At 6:16 p.m., I sat at my kitchen table and waited. The room was silent, no wind, no outside noise. When the clock turned to 6:17, everything stopped again. But this time, the air shifted. The walls didn't disappear. They deepened, like shadows were gaining dimension, and from behind me, I heard it. Not footsteps, roots, dragging slowly across hardwood floors. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to, because I felt it in my chest, the same presence from Savannah. Not as strong, not as whole, but aware. "You cannot leave what you carry," it whispered. The voice wasn't my father's, it wasn't anyone's, it was layered, many tones at once, woven together. "I didn't agree to carry you," I said. "You offered," it replied. The memory hit me. "I'll keep it empty." That's what I'd said. Not destroy, not end. Keep empty. The oak tree in the cemetery had been unmarked, unclaimed, but trees grow, roots spread, and roots don't respect distance. The presence moved closer. I could feel it now, like cold pressure at my back. "You are not keeper, you are doorway." The kitchen lights flickered. My reflection in the microwave door shifted just slightly. Behind me, in the reflection only, the oak tree stood tall, branches scraping the ceiling, and beneath it, shadows moved, hands pressing upward, not to grab, to escape. I stood slowly. "If you think I'm letting you use me, you misunderstand," it interrupted. Its tone changed, almost curious. "You are not preventing balance." A pause. "You are delaying hunger." The clock jumped to 6:18. The pressure vanished instantly. The kitchen snapped back to normal. No tree, no shadows, no roots. I stood there shaking, one truth settling heavier than fear. Savannah didn't lose its Watcher. It planted one, and whether I wanted it or not, I was growing something. I stopped sleeping after that, because sleep is when it grows. Every night after 6:17, I'd feel it stretching somewhere beneath me, not physically, not in a way anyone else could see, but like pressure beneath the surface of reality. Like something testing the walls of a container that wasn't meant to hold it. Eleanor's words kept replaying in my head. "You can stay, take his place completely, bind yourself to it."
I thought I'd avoided that choice. I hadn't. I'd just relocated it. 3 days after the kitchen incident, I got a call from my sister. Her voice was shaking. "Michael, I need you to tell me something honestly." My chest tightened. "What's wrong?" "There's a tree in Dad's old backyard." "We sold that house years ago." "What kind of tree?" I asked carefully. She hesitated. "An oak." My mouth went dry. "That's not possible," I said. "It wasn't there last week," she whispered, "and it's huge. The new owners think it's diseased or something. The bark is black in places, and the roots—" She stopped. "The roots are pushing up through the lawn," she finished, "like they're searching." The clock on my wall read 6:16 p.m. "Get out of the house," I said immediately. "What? Why? Just go, now." The second hand ticked forward. 6:17. Silence fell over my apartment again, but this time it wasn't just here. Through the phone, I heard it too. Wind, leaves rustling, wood groaning under tension, and then crunch, gravel, slow, familiar. My sister's breathing quickened. "There's someone in the yard." My heart slammed against my ribs. "Don't look," I said, but she already had. Her voice changed, softened. "Dad?" The air in my apartment thickened instantly. "No, that's not him." On the line, I heard footsteps moving closer to her, matching her breathing. "Michael," the layered voice whispered, not from my phone, from behind me. I turned slowly. The oak tree was there again, not in reflection, not in shadow, in my living room. Its trunk split the floorboards cleanly in half. Branches scraped the ceiling, stretching outward as if measuring the space. And beneath it, figures, not fully formed, faces pressing outward from darkness like shapes behind fabric. The same faces I'd seen inside the Watcher. It wasn't bound, it was branching. "You promised to keep it empty," the voice said calmly. My sister screamed through the phone. I dropped it and lunged toward the tree, grabbing at its bark. It felt cold and damp, like stone soaked in river water. "I didn't promise to feed you," I shouted. "You promised containment." The walls of my apartment began cracking outward as the roots expanded, splitting drywall, snapping wood, pushing into the world beyond my control. Through the chaos, I saw something worse than fear in the shadows beneath the branches. Recognition. It knew me now, not as prey, not as replacement, but as soil. "You cannot outrun what is planted," it said. My phone lay on the floor, still connected. I could hear my sister crying. The voice in her yard, wearing my father's shape, spoke gently. "You don't belong here," it told her. The same sentence, the same tone. I understood then. It wasn't just following blood. It was following grief. Wherever loss existed, it could root. And I had carried Savannah's oldest hunger straight into my own family. The tree in my apartment leaned slightly toward me, not threatening, inviting. "You can end this," it said. "How?" I demanded. "Return." The word hit me like cold water. Return. Back to Savannah, Georgia. Back to the cemetery. Back to where the soil first opened. "You were never meant to transplant," The ground there knows the cost. The faces beneath the branches shifted. Among them, I saw my father, not trapped, waiting. The clock jumped to 6:18. The tree vanished. The apartment snapped back into place. No cracks, no roots, no damage, just silence. My phone lay still on the floor. Call ended. I tried calling my sister back. No answer. That night, I booked the first flight back to Savannah, because if the Watcher wanted its soil, I was going to give it something deeper.
I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not my sister, not my coworkers, not the airline clerk who barely glanced at my ID. Because how do you explain that you're flying back to a city that planted something inside you? The descent into Georgia felt wrong. Clouds swallowed the plane in thick gray silence, and for a few long minutes, turbulence shook the cabin like unseen hands were testing the hull. When we broke through the clouds, I saw the coastline stretching out beneath us, and even from that height, something in my chest tightened, like a root recognizing its origin. By the time I reached Savannah, Georgia, dusk had settled in. The air was heavy, humid, familiar, and watching. I didn't go to a hotel this time. I went straight to Bonaventure Cemetery. The gates were closed, locked, but the chain hanging across them looked old, rusted, brittle, symbolic more than secure. I stepped closer. The moment my hand touched the iron, the chain fell loose on its own, not broken, released. The cemetery at night is not like it is during the day. In daylight, it feels historic. At night, it feels awake. The oak trees loomed like sentinels. Spanish moss swayed without wind. The river beyond the graves reflected almost no moonlight, black as spilled ink. And at the center, the unmarked oak tree, the one that replaced my gravestone. It stood taller than before, thicker, alive in a way that felt deliberate. I walked toward it slowly. Each step felt like stepping deeper into water. When I reached the tree, I pressed my palm against the bark. It was warm, not cold, warm like something breathing. "You brought it back," I said quietly. The ground shifted beneath my feet, not violently, just enough to remind me that it was listening. "You carried it away unfinished," the layered voice answered, not from the air, from inside the tree. "You scattered the count." Faces pressed faintly against the bark, not screaming, waiting. "My sister," I said. "You went after her." "Grief opens soil," it replied. "You understand that now." I closed my eyes. "You want containment?" I asked. "Fine." The tree's branches creaked overhead. "You will remain," it said. "No," I corrected. "I will root." The air tightened around me. "What is the difference?" it asked. I pressed both hands against the trunk. "The difference is choice." The ground began to soften beneath my shoes, like mud forming where there had been solid earth. Roots coiled upward around my ankles, not violently, not restraining, testing. "You believe you can anchor hunger," it said. "I believe I can starve it," I replied. Silence stretched between us. Then, images flooded my mind. Generations buried here, Civil War soldiers, children lost to fever, families broken by storms and disease, decades of sorrow layered into the soil like sediment. Savannah wasn't haunted because of ghosts. It was saturated with loss. The Watcher hadn't created the hunger. It had managed it. And when I broke it, I removed the filter. The tree pulsed once under my hands. "You would bind yourself to this ground?" it asked. "Yes." "And never leave?" "Yes." "And surrender name?"
The word struck deeper than the others. Surrender name. No grave marker, no history, no Michael Harrison, just soil. I thought of my sister, of the oak tree in her yard, of the voice wearing my father's face. Yes, I said. The ground gave way completely. Roots wrapped around my legs, waist, chest, not crushing, not painful, integrating. The bark beneath my palms split slightly, not in damage, in acceptance. You understand, it said. I do. My father's face appeared in the grain of the wood, not trapped, not distorted, calm. You don't have to carry this alone, he said softly. I know, I replied. The river wind rose. The branches above spread wide, stretching outward across the cemetery like arms opening. The soil climbed higher, up my shoulders, around my throat. The last thing I saw before the earth closed over me was the sky above Savannah clearing completely, cloudless, still, and for the first time since all of this began, the clock in my mind stopped at 6:17 and did not move.
I don't know how long I stayed beneath the soil. Time doesn't work the same way once you surrender your name. There was no darkness, only pressure easing into stillness, like slipping beneath calm water and realizing you don't need to breathe anymore. The roots didn't bind me. They listened. They learned the shape of my thoughts, the weight of my memories, the exact texture of my grief. I became depth, and Savannah became quiet. Not silent, never silent, but balanced, the kind of balance that comes after a long fever finally breaks. When awareness returned, it wasn't sight or sound that came first, it was knowing. I knew when footsteps crossed the cemetery paths at night. I knew when tourists laughed too loudly during the day, unaware of how close the ground listened. I knew when someone knelt beside a grave with fresh loss still sharp enough to cut, and I knew when hunger stirred, because it still does, just slower now, controlled, filtered through me. I feel the city above like a pulse, Savannah, Georgia, breathing through brick and bone, river and root. I feel storms before clouds gather. I feel sorrow settle into soil long before tears fall. And when grief sinks too deep, I hold it. That was the bargain, not a prison, a responsibility. People still talk about hauntings here. They always will. Shadows near old homes, cold spots in alleys, footsteps that don't belong to anyone living. They're not wrong, but they're not being hunted anymore, because now the city has something it didn't before, a conscience. Sometimes, at exactly 6:17, the world pauses, just for a fraction of a second. Clocks hesitate, birds stop mid-call, leaves freeze in the air. Most people never notice, but a few do. Those few feel a strange calm wash over them, like something unseen stepped between them and a long fall. That's me. I don't appear to them. I don't whisper names or borrow faces. I've learned the cost of that. Instead, I anchor. I redirect. I keep the roots where they belong. The oak tree at Bonaventure Cemetery is still there, unmarked, wider now,
stronger. Its branches shelter mourners from rain. Its shade cools the ground where too much sorrow once pooled. No one remembers when it appeared, only that it's always been there. That's how it should be. My sister never saw our father again. The oak in her backyard died quietly within days of my return. The roots receded without damage, leaving only soft soil and unanswered questions. She told me later, years later, that for the first time since Dad's death, she slept through the night. I wanted to tell her why. I didn't. Names have weight, and I don't carry one anymore. Sometimes, late at night, tour guides tell stories near the cemetery gates. They talk about watchers, about spirits that guard the dead, about a man who vanished the same year the hauntings changed. They're closer to the truth than they realize. I'm not a ghost. I'm not alive. I am keeping something from growing teeth again. And if you ever walk beneath the oaks in Savannah and feel the ground warm beneath your feet instead of cold, if you ever sense something listening, not with hunger, but with restraint, that's not the city watching you. That's me, making sure you leave, because some places don't need more stories. They need someone willing to stay buried with them. And I am still here, counting, holding, breathing with the roots, so you don't have to.